All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for our September webinar. I just wanted to welcome you and thank you. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join us today. Before we get started, just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so we will send out a link probably tomorrow with the webinar recording and the slides that you will see today. So be on the lookout for that. Also, throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, you can drop them in either the chat box or the Q&A. I will keep an eye on that throughout and pass that info along to Kyle and Austin. And we will also take some time at the end of the presentation to do a brief Q&A as well. So without further ado, we can get started. My name is Riley Anderson. I'm the Marketing and Public Relations Manager here at the Retail Coach. And I'm joined with Kyle Cofer and Austin Farmer today, two of our project directors. So Kyle, Austin, I will hand it over to you guys.
Kyle's still muted. Hey, everyone. Hey, you ready, Kyle?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Yeah. Hey, thanks for joining us. My name is Austin Farmer, project director at the Retail Coach. Saw some familiar faces that had signed up. So I know we've got a mix of some clients on, as well as some just community leaders throughout the country. So excited to talk to y'all. And I think we're going to address a couple of the issues that you're looking at with retail. Kyle's actually going to lead today, and I'm going to offer some commentary and kind of jump in here and there. But Kyle's going to walk through some key strategies for really tackling your retail recruitment efforts and talk about some of the things that we're seeing. And I'll join in here and there. But Kyle, I'll hand it off to you to go ahead and get started.
Perfect. Riley, Austin, kind of thank you for the introduction there. Really to start off, a little bit about the Retail Coach. It really boils down to us being a full service retail recruitment firm, A to Z, from coming in and doing the market analysis, being on the ground in communities, all the way to retail recruitment. So finding sites that are available for different retailers and restaurants, and really knowing who to talk to, what type of sites they're looking for. So really a full service approach there. Been around for right at 23 years now, worked in 650 plus client communities. We have a 90% client repeat business rate, which is something we're extremely proud of. And then over that time period, we've generated over $600 million in sales tax generation for our client communities. And that really goes towards 6 million plus square feet of new retail over the past few years. So that's a little bit about us, kind of from a 10,000 foot view of what the Retail Coach does on a regular basis.
Hey, Kyle, I know we kind of simplify it a lot of times when we're talking to people, but for those of you that are joining us for the first time or aren't familiar with the Retail Coach, we basically just work with cities and economic development corporations to help identify where there's retail fits for your community and then help you recruit those retailers. So our core focus there is really just identifying retail fits and then acting as an extension of your team to go out and get those retailers and developers to the community. That's kind of our simplified way of explaining that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then, kind of our agenda today. So the three major things that we're going to hit are, first thing is trends in impacting the retail industry. Second thing is trade area analysis, really diving into the data that we can provide national brands that they're looking for before they will locate in your community or not. And then really some best practices to attract businesses for, local leaders, to where y'all can kind of get some of the same information that we use on the recruitment side. So really to kick off, retail is economic development, and I'm sure you have heard the term quality of life over the past few years, and has really come on the scene is that's what people are looking for when they're going to locate in a community or not. A community that has a strong retail base of national, local, and regional brands. And then to recruit these businesses, it's kind of all in sync with having a strong industry and corporate recruitment. Retailers and restaurants, they're going to want to know that they can pull from, a bigger, stronger local workforce. Daytime population is a big thing that retailers and restaurants look for. as well as residential development. We work all over the country, and kind of one thing that we've seen repeated throughout is the need for more affordable housing. And the old saying that rooftops drive retail is still very alive, and that's something that kind of we're seeing all over the country now. So just retail, restaurant recruitment, a lot of things kind of go into it, and that's something to keep in mind, that industry, workforce, as well as residential plays a very large role in that. And with recruitment, comes sales tax. That's something that we take a close look at. That's always something that's on the minds of our client communities, is how much sales tax do these individual retailers and restaurants bring in, as well as job creation. So Chick-fil-A and McDonald's, if you recruit one of those concepts to come to your community, it's going to bring about 30 jobs and about $50,000 in sales tax annually. Walmart brings in around 325 jobs, $750,000 annually in sales tax. So, we always tell our clients that retail recruitment is a long-term game. Small wins over time add up to big wins in the short term. So, you might not be able to go out and land a Target or a Home Depot in year one, but maybe some small wins with Starbucks on the quick service restaurant side, over time, those do play a very large role.
Yeah, and Kyle, I think a good point there is, a lot of people don't get super excited over new fast food restaurants or over a new coffee concept. But, from our perspective, what we see just as economic developers is building that base. You're continually generating sales tax, you're creating jobs, and it goes back to that point of quality of life that Kyle talks about. And so a lot of times, we may get a small retailer here, or a fast food restaurant, or maybe a fast casual restaurant that doesn't seem like the economic impact is huge. But you really get that snowball effect of building that base with some of those smaller retailers or food concepts, building that continuous tax flow and tax base. And then as you're doing that, getting quality of life, and then becoming a market that those larger retailers like the Targets, Home Depots, Walmarts come into. And, we see a lot of communities successfully kind of build that base and start to see that economic impact really get amplified as they get additional retailers through 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah. And one last thing I want to mention is that, retail recruitment is almost like a stepping stone. So you're going to continue to see the small quick service restaurants come in before the national sit down concepts. And then you're going to see the larger retailers. It's kind of what we consider retail synergy. They all kind of know where they like to locate, who they like to locate around. So, like Austin said, that's something to keep in mind, that small wins are big over time. And then kind of moving forward on retail trends. So COVID-19 caused a lot of retail disruption, especially for brick and mortar stores, and kind of allowed us to see some shifts in the retail industry, as well as online. Amazon did extremely well through COVID-19. Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max streaming services, they were up in subscriptions big time over the course of the height of the pandemic. And then social media platforms. I don't know if y'all are like me, but it seemed like during the pandemic, every time I got on Facebook or Instagram, there was an online brand that was popping up on my phone. So we really saw an influx of kind of jumping ahead with kind of online concepts through technology, as well as Uber Eats, Grubhub, and DoorDash. We saw a lot of sit-down concepts that stayed alive due to these offerings, and then click lists from Kroger and Walmart pick up groceries. So kind of going online, being able to choose what you want, and then having it ready for pickup. That is something that really jumped ahead due to COVID, and something that we believe is here to stay. I'm sure there's a lot of people that really started picking up their groceries during COVID, kind of doing the click and pick option, and now have continued to use that, coming out of the pandemic.
And Kyle, I think that theme across all those that we've seen is kind of that ongoing shift for most retail consumers of on-demand consumption, same as with media, and then the convenience factor as well. People realized, hey, I don't have to go into an office every day. I can actually work from home, and I can have things delivered, or I can pick them up on my schedule when I want to. So that's, I think, the translation you'll talk a little bit more about for brick and mortar and how that translates to brick and mortar. But that seems to be the theme that we've seen, is just on-demand consumption and convenience, particularly with retail.
Yeah. Everything is geared toward making experience more easy, really on the consumer there. You're exactly right. Kind of even building on that. So in a matter of 90 days during the COVID-19 outbreak, it's estimated that we vaulted forward 10 years in consumer and business digital adaptation. So, the QR codes, everybody saw the QR codes when, you would go to a restaurant, you would pull up the full menu. I've seen that is here to stay. A lot of restaurants in my hometown are still using the QR codes because it cuts down on cost if they want to go in and change the menu. Online ordering, like we mentioned with Walmart and Kroger, everything is very easy. And we saw this on the national side, and then the small businesses that kind of saw what was taking place on the national side and adapted that are ones that, are still around today that perform really well during the pandemic. So it's crazy to think that over 90 days, we really jumped forward that much on the technology side of things. And then really some brands that, reacted heavily to, COVID-19. One is Buffalo Wild Wings Go. So they really started rolling out this new concept. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with Buffalo Wild Wings, but basically what it is, a 1,200 to 1,400 square foot concept. They'll go inline, they'll go in cap, and it's everything that a main Buffalo Wild Wings has, just shrunk. More focus on to-go orders, a limited menu, but really figured out, okay, how can we take our large concept that has struggled during the pandemic and, take some of these tips and tricks that we're seeing more, small businesses, smaller concepts take, and how can we replicate that? So, Smoothie King did online order pickups where it was contactless. Target did their drive up concept where it was 100% contactless, where everybody was coming out and bringing your things, similar to Kroger and Walmart that we've hit on. Then order pickup lockers. So I know Home Depot was kind of on the forefront of bringing these out, where you would put your order, and then based on the size of the goods you were purchasing, if they could fit in this locker, they would send you a code where you could put that code in, and a door would open up, and what you purchased would be there. So Austin, it's kind of cool to see some of these new tips and practices that some of these retailers really on the front end and restaurants have rolled out over time.
Yeah, and I know you've got Target on there as an example. I've been traveling a lot this last week or so. Just got back from the airport actually a little bit earlier today, and I've been in 3 or 4 different states over the last week. And there's actually a Target down the road from me in Austin that's closed for renovation because they're actually reformatting the store to put an emphasis on pickup orders and delivery. And I've actually seen that across multiple states just this week. And just got back from Iowa this afternoon and saw it in Omaha, Nebraska, and Des Moines, Iowa. They're kind of updating those store formats to really capitalize off of those orders and delivery. And then was out in Southern California last week, and Lake Elsinore, California store is under redevelopment as well. And so you're really starting to see that investment and that buy into those trends where they're really leaning into a lot of that digital and kind of brick and mortar integration, where they're saying, okay, we know how the consumer wants to consume. Now we're going to format our stores to really make sure that we make it easy for them. So it's one of those things that, we often see trends start and they'll kind of test them out. But it seems like most of the major retailers that we've done work with have really leaned into, okay, there's a new way for consumers to really consume and buy goods. And we're starting to see that even at the brick and mortar level too.
Yeah. And then kind of even building on that even more. Gyms and superstores drew the most foot traffic during an uneven retail recovery. So, take a look at the green there, the full service restaurants. You can see how down they were because, their seating areas weren't open. And then kind of as COVID continued to peel off, we really saw a big jump on the fitness scale. On the fitness side of things, and also kind of the home stores as well did extremely well during the time. Obviously grocery stores as well, because restaurants were closed and individuals had to find some way to get their food and goods as well. So kind of crazy to see how much the fitness side jumped up as well out of this. And we're kind of starting to see that with new boutique fitness concepts roll out, as well as, kind of some new in-home fitness concepts that, are out there today. So kind of some cool things to think there that most people don't realize that kind of happened coming out of COVID.
And Kyle, that's an interesting topic as well, because we often talk to economic developers or city managers that say, hey, fitness isn't really retail. And, we couldn't disagree more. It's a great anchor tenant to have in large mixed use developments. It drives a lot of foot traffic, a lot of daily foot traffic. And so there's a lot of really good opportunities with that gym growth to capitalize on some synergies, or to find an anchor that you could get into a large center that could drive some synergy for a center, and really does amplify retail sales, because people often will batch trips together. And so if they're going to the gym, they may run into or out of a store or a couple of stores on the way or on the way back. So they're actually really, really great retail tenants or mixed use tenants, when, a lot of people don't necessarily consider that in that retail umbrella, but it's a great driver for property owners and for larger developments, as well as even just small strip centers.
Yeah, and kind of building that on that even more is, personally, I've seen that become more of a need, more of a request from kind of our clients. The good thing about these gyms is they'll come in and take up, large vacant space, to where, oftentimes now larger box retailers are shrinking their format, and that's also shrinking the number of prospects that are available to come in and take large portions of space. So we're seeing kind of all over the country that these gyms are continuing to kind of feed off what happened with COVID and rolling out rapid expansion throughout the country right now. So kind of keep that in mind and think, okay, do we have a gym locally? And if not, what type of gym could we support? So, kind of keep that in mind. And then kind of total e-commerce sales. E-commerce does not necessarily mean that it's going to be a loss for brick and mortar locally. E-commerce sales have been driven by a surge in click and collect, specifically curbside pickup, buy online pickup. And click and collect. So basically what that means is going online, clicking what you want, buying that good, buying those groceries, and then going to a specific store and picking that up. So kind of what we talked about with Kroger, with Walmart, with Target as well. That is what click and collect is. This last point, click and collect e-commerce experiences a growth explosion since the onset of the pandemic. However, these transactions still require customers to travel to brick and mortar. So basically what that means is, there's still a need to have brick and mortar stores, not just online sales. So you can kind of see this over here. So this percent change of total e-commerce. So in 2020, that red there is up 106.9%. And then in 2021, kind of dipped back down to, right there level with brick and mortar sales. So, a lot of people think that total retail sales outweighs, brick and mortar online by a large percentage. And that's really just not the case, which is kind of justified by this graph here.
And I think you're going to talk about this in a second on this next slide, Kyle, but what we're seeing more so than anything, there's been this kind of sentiment over the last decade or so that eventually e-commerce is going to catch up or overcome brick and mortar retail sales. as a total percentage of retail sales, brick and mortar is still, less than 25% of all retail sales. So more than 75% of those sales is still happening in brick and mortar stores. And we've done a lot of work recently with a lot of digital brands that have come to the realization that they have to have a presence both online and in the real world in brick and mortar stores. We see it a lot with Amazon. We've done a couple of Amazon fresh grocery stores. Amazon starting to come out with some of their smaller concepts for other brick and mortar stores as well. And then starting to see that with a lot of the, direct to consumer brands, from bonobos to other brands that have said, hey, we started online, but we know that to really fulfill our potential, we have to have that brick and mortar presence as well. And so we're going to see more of that integration, not necessarily that replacement, and that a lot of people have thought about. And I think that's a good lead in, Kyle, to this next slide, because we can already see how big retail brands are actually implementing this in their stores, and then ultimately how the e-commerce plays a role and even how they fulfill those orders.
Yeah, definitely. So, 95% of online orders were fulfilled at the store level during the pandemic. So really backs up what we just said is you're ordering all these things, but you're still picking them up at a brick and mortar location. So that just, it just supports what Austin just said about, how these transactions are still occurring in brick and mortar stores. So, fulfill 70% of the orders from stores, cuts delivery time by 10%. So everything is very quick. And then in 2020, the retailer fulfills 6% of online orders from stores. So that's Lowe's specifically. So a lot of people would just buy online and then have it there ready to pick up, ready to go. So like I said, everything, keep in mind, everything is geared more towards making the life of the consumer easy, or making the consumer's experience much easier. So brick and mortar is not here to go, which was supported by the pandemic and then post pandemic. And then, this kind of shows, brick and mortar continually how it is essential. So really shows Walmart versus Amazon. So in March 31st, April 2nd, Walmart fulfillment really passed Amazon's online sales. So really cool to see that, which most people would never have thought of. Walmart, grocery stores, superstores were up, on average 70-80% visitor wise and sell wise during the pandemic, and even past Amazon during that time period, which is considered kind of the king of online sales. So that's something that's cool to see there.
And it's one of those things where, to your point, Kyle, the most retail brands are going for a frictionless consumer experience. And so we're seeing it from top to bottom, even with service-based concepts and really across the entire retail world. They all are recognizing that it's not a this or that situation, it's this and that. And they have to have a strong e-commerce presence, but they also have to have that brick and mortar presence, because you're never going to capture all of those retail sales on either side of that spectrum. There's a mix of both. So that's where we've seen a lot of investment. I think the exciting thing for maybe some smaller communities or some communities that have a strong Main Street presence too, is that, local businesses and individual independent business owners, mom and pop shops, are starting to have some of those same resources, and they're starting to invest in the online e-commerce side as well. So we're starting to see that permeate across not just the national brands and the big players, but also some mom and pop retail stores. And that's a great thing for the business as a whole, and then ultimately for that consumer experience, because it makes more products available to more people. And that's really where we've seen that shift go, is just the investment in both sides of the equation, but haven't seen that retail apocalypse or that brick and mortar apocalypse like we thought we would. So that's a great sign that they see that as a complementary tool, and not that everyone is shifting over to just e-commerce.
Yeah, definitely. And then, this is kind of a cool thing here, slide I always like is opening a physical store in a market leads to 37% average increase in overall web traffic. So if a small business opens, if a national business opens, people are going to be online. They're going to want to see what they offer. So, I always tell people, if you're a small business locally, you've got to be online to kind of keep up with the times. on social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, those type things, because people are going to be looking at you to want to know what type of goods and services you offer. And kind of to build on that is there's this misconception that based on the market, based on the pandemic, that retailers and restaurants aren't opening any locations right now, which is just not the case. Austin and I have both been to quite a few different retail trade shows in the past few months, and I'll tell you, we've met with a number of concepts that are on this list and some that aren't on this list. And everybody is expanding right now. And you see TJ Maxx, Marshalls on the list. They're rolling out a little bit smaller store now than they were, but they're still rolling out concepts. Starbucks is on this list. I saw something where they're planning on rolling out 2,000 stores by 2025. So if you're a city leader, or you want to be thinking, how can we get one of those 2,000 Starbucks that are going to be rolling out in the next few years? So based on everything you hear, is not always true about kind of where things stand in the retail restaurant expansion wise.
And Kyle, Carrie from our team and I'll both be going out to ICSC actually on tomorrow, actually. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in San Diego for the ICSC Western Conference. And just in preparing for that conference, had a lot of great conversations with some of our clients and some communities that we're working with. And one of the questions that comes up often, especially as we're coming out of COVID and kind of looking at this potential looming recession, is, why should we be aggressive if we're heading into a recession or potential recession? And one of the things we've heard a lot from these retailers and actually a lot of developers as well is they're being aggressive now, assuming that the interest rates are going to keep going up and assuming that it's going to be more expensive in the next 18, 24 months to go and expand the way that they want to. So now is actually a great time if you're looking at retail recruitment or options to get into that. It's time to be aggressive, because there's a short window over the next 6 to 12 months where they're really going to do as much expansion as they can, assuming that there could be a slowdown in the next 18, 24, 36 months. So, if you've thought about that, or you're looking at that and saying, okay, is now a good time? I think it definitely is. A lot of the retailers we've met with over the last few months have said, hey, we're ramping up for the short term because we know that there's potentially going to be a slowdown in the next 2 to 3, 4 years, however long that may be. So just something to put out there to think about in terms of timing. Now is a great time to be, great time to be aggressive. And then if we do hit a slowdown or things start to slow down a little bit, you're at an advantage because you've been out there recruiting those retailers. You're on their radar. They've seen you. They're familiar with the community, familiar with sites. So just want to throw that in there in terms of timing. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but it's actually a great time to be as aggressive as possible with getting in front of these retailers.
Yeah. And then, kind of from that with retail restaurant expansion, we're seeing a lot of these brands open up kind of new, cool concepts. I know Taco Bell, I'll show a picture of in here in a second, is I've actually seen kind of one of their new stores that they've rolled out, but, kind of look at this Burger King concept. Everything is geared more towards, drive-through pickup. Sonic. We did some reports on Sonic throughout the pandemic, and some of their locations were up 90% during COVID because they were almost COVID proof. They were really already set up for the grab and go. And, other retailers and restaurants kind of sat back and said, okay, hey, how can we replicate what Sonic has done for so long? And you're seeing it with Shake Shack kind of offering the 2 double drive-throughs that, Chick-fil-A was the one that kind of pioneered that. A lot of the fast food concepts are looking at, the grab and go lanes, the 2-lane pickup. So over time, I think we're going to continue to see this kind of shift, smaller footprints of seating in store, which is going to change kind of site requirements. I've kind of seen this on the front end already. Austin is some of these concepts that we're looking at an acre in the past can do something that's a little bit smaller than that now. So it's always good for us to keep up with kind of what retailers and restaurants are doing, as well as kind of a key for yourself, knowing, what type sites they're looking for, what type traffic counts and those types of things. So that's kind of cool to see on the front end of these new stores that are rolling out.
Yeah, and we're seeing that really across the country as well. We're seeing a lot of flexibility. To your point, Kyle, they used to require kind of a standard, hey, we need right at an acre, and we're going to have a single lane drive-through concept on that. We're seeing more and more retailers, and particularly fast food restaurants, shift towards that smaller drive-through only. We're actually working in the city of Lancaster, California, and they're under construction right now for a new Chick-fil-A that's a drive-through only Chick-fil-A. So they've got a couple of tables and seating outside, but it's 3 drive-through lanes, and it's primarily just focused at getting people through as efficiently as possible. But we've also seen them actually take 2 acres in another community just outside of Nashville. We're working in Springfield, Tennessee. They're taking 2 acres and they're having a double and possibly triple drive-through with a larger sit-down presence, because that market still likes to go in and eat. So that's a great thing for the communities that we're working with, because there's a lot of flexibility there where they can go, hey, we can actually fit on 3/4 of an acre or some smaller spaces, or they can actually take advantage of the space and create a store or location that's going to fit that market if they need more space. So that's been really great for us in terms of just getting them to markets they wouldn't consider before. So there's a lot of flexibility there. I think the key takeaway in terms of just recruitment, if you're out there talking to retailers, just knowing that they have some flexibility and they have different concepts. Just because you don't have a site that looks like it's an out of the box location that would work, that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't entertain that idea or that they don't have a concept that could work for that space.
Yeah, 100%. And then just building on this, so this is actually a kind of new futuristic looking Taco Bell concept that they've rolled out in Minnesota. So it's 2 stories. It's about 3,000 square feet. So you pull up through the bottom, and they actually drop your food down to you. So we're not saying that every new Taco Bell is going to look just like this, but kind of in larger areas, this is something that they're starting to roll out. So like Austin said, just because you think that your piece of property might not work for the traditional Taco Bell, or the traditional restaurant that you're typically used to seeing, chances are that they have 3 or 4 different prototypes that would work for larger and smaller sites. And then kind of to build on that, what we're seeing from the restaurants, we're also kind of seeing from retailers as well, shrinking store formats, and then really rolling out kind of their more discount concept. So I've seen this really all over the country that, the discount stores are super hot right now. Backstage stores is really what Macy's calls theirs. There's quite a few other brands that roll these out as well. But, if you have some existing space in your community, and you're looking for a clothing concept to fill that void, there's different levels of discount stores that would be, on the top of my list if I were y'all about retail recruitment and kind of who you're looking to fill that space. So that's good to see as well, kind of on the clothing side.
And something interesting on that Macy's front, that the driving factor behind them incorporating Backstage is they did a study, and the locations, particularly in the Northeast, that they had a Backstage concept inside of, when they compared those to their standalone Macy's stores that didn't have that Backstage concept, their sales were actually 50% higher. So it kind of boosts the sales per square foot of their existing locations, helps them do more with less space. And it looks like it's something that they'll try to incorporate long-term, because that's been so successful. And then the other thing there is just, no pun intended, but don't discount department stores. We've seen a big shift over the last probably 5 to 10 years of the amount of adoption of consumers of going to discount department stores, and really across the board, everything from Ross and some of those kind of first tier, kind of lower quality type discount department stores, all the way up to Nordstrom Rack and Saks off Fifth Avenue. But there's a really strong segment there in that discount department store segment, and they've grown a ton. So there's a lot of the TJ Maxx's, Marshalls, Ross's, DD's discounts of the world that are really doing a lot right now. So if you have a strip center or a development that has a larger box in it, a lot of those are building right now, and they're still in that 30,000-40,000 square foot range. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and they actually do really well in terms of retail sales and sales tax generation. So I know it's kind of easy to write them off sometimes as just one of those discount stores, but that segment has done really well, and it looks like they're poised for a lot of growth over the next 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah, definitely. And then really retail recruitment. So bringing in new retail, kind of the quality of life that we talked about on that opening slide. Retail is a large component of that. And every community needs to have really a comprehensive economic development strategy. So comprehensive is something that's not going to take place overnight. Retail recruitment takes a long time, but y'all need to know what type of sites, what are retailers and restaurants looking for. So for example, if you want to bring in a Jersey Mike's to your community, you need to know what they're looking for. You need to know if you're a fit for a Jersey Mike's or if you're not. So your community really has to check off 8 to 10 of their boxes before they'll consider you or not. They're going to want to know what your retail trade area population is. So we'll get into a little bit about that later, but how far are consumers traveling into your community on a regular basis that aren't living there? They want to know the ethnicity of the community members, age, how much disposable income is available, daytime population, location, store size. I was actually meeting at a retail trade show not too long ago with a sandwich shop. It wasn't Jersey Mike's, but they rely heavily on a daytime population because they do about 70% of their sales during lunchtime. So that's a number that you're going to need to have when you go out and market your community to these retailers and restaurants. It's really all scientific now. They're going to know 1,000% if they can be successful in your community before they even open, just based on location, site criteria. Are they looking for 12,000 to 1,800 square feet, which is typically what Jersey Mike's looks for? So there's no need to go send them a 2,500 square foot lease space that's available. So it's all about sending retailers and restaurants what's a fit for them specifically.
And Kyle, as you jump into that next slide and talk about some specific examples, just a quick note, that can be hard to find sometimes. If you have a question about a specific retailer or their requirements, feel free to reach out to us. We have a lot of that for a lot of the larger retailers and some of the kind of more niche regional ones as well. But that's not necessarily a checkbox that if you don't check every single box, they're not going to come. But it is important to know if you're going to approach those retailers, how you stack up based on what their core requirements are, and then be able to have conversations with them about how you can overcome some of those if you don't check every single box, or ways to at least raise that conversation and say, hey, we know that we don't necessarily meet your typical criteria, but here's something that we think is interesting and why we think you'd be well. So it's really important to know those, not only just in the sense of, hey, how do we stack up versus what they're actually looking for, but also being able to overcome some of that and be able to have those conversations and say, hey, we don't check this box, but here's what we think is important and how we really overcome that. We've seen a lot of client communities go into a conversation saying, well, we don't really meet their requirements, but because of certain factors like higher traffic counts in certain areas or daytime population where they have a swell of people coming in for lunch and that early dinner crowd, there's a lot of times where you might not check all those boxes, but you're still coming away with an LOI from one of those retailers because you're offsetting that with something else. So it's important to know that, especially if you're going to have conversations with those retailers.
Yeah, definitely. And then also, just kind of building on that is identify and target appropriate retailers for recruitment. So kind of looking at yourself, doing some self-reflection and saying, okay, are we a Bloomingdale's community or are we a Bloomingdale's community? So, chances are if you just got your first, Dollar General, Target is not an immediate fit. So just realizing, okay, what's that natural flow of progression for retailers and restaurants? Who are we a fit for? Similar to the past 2 slides, knowing what type of retailers and restaurants are a fit and kind of what they're looking for, what their site requirements are for your community. So really doing some self-reflection there and knowing, what type of community y'all are and who you're a fit for.
Hey, Kyle, real quick before you go through this, we're coming up on 2:45, so we'll work a little bit quicker through these last slides and just give you some practical tips on what we think is important and some data you should have and some things you should be doing. But if you have questions, Riley's watching the Q&A box and the chat box. Go ahead and start putting those in, and we'll start answering them in just a minute. Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, definitely. So, I kind of hit on, having the type data that retailers and restaurants want to see before they'll locate in your community. So one of those is a retail trade area. So knowing, how large your draw is. So if you're a community of 8 to 10,000, but you have a strong workforce in your community, and your community grows during the day to 50 or 60,000, that's what your trade area is. You got to know that. You got to know what that boundary is. Obviously something that we can help facilitate. But if you're marketing yourself as an 8,000 population when you grow to 50 or 60,000 trade area population, you're obviously selling yourself short. So having those radials, drive times, and retail trade area population is really essential for retail recruitment. And one way we do that is through a cell phone analysis. So really going in and drawing a polygon, pinpointing high traffic retail areas, typically grocery stores and communities, and really being able to see, physically how far consumers are traveling to that specific location. So if you're within a specific area, we draw a polygon around, and you have one of the top 1,000 apps in the App Store pulled up on your phone, and chances are one of those are tracking your location. This gives us the factual type data that we need to send to retailers or restaurants to say, hey, here's who's here, here's who's traveling here on a regular basis, just outside of the community population, outside of who's living there on a regular basis. So that's really a key tool that has come online in the past few years, and something that we use a lot on the recruitment side. And then from that, we're able to see kind of a heat map. So the darker red, this is a client of ours in Hillsborough, Texas. We ran this on a large shopping center in town, so you can see outside of who just lives there, how large that draw is for this specific area. And then from that, we really go in and draw a retail trade area. So this is a hand-drawn boundary specifically based on that cell phone study that we did for Hillsborough. And then from that, we go out and run our reports on this boundary. So, we're going to run a population report. We're going to run an educational report, income, race distribution, and age. These are the type things that retailers and restaurants want to see, the factual data that they need to see before they'll locate in your community. And obviously really just makes their job much easier on them.
And the big selling point there, Kyle, I think is, it's important to know where people are coming from when they come into and out of your community, especially because most retailers and restaurants are going to look at computer models and just under assume what your actual trade area is. We actually are working in a community right now that has a city population of about 20,000, but their retail trade area is up over 100,000 because they have a regional draw. And TJ Maxx would never look at them just because they said, hey, you're too small, you don't have a population base. And we were able to actually get TJ Maxx committed to the market because we were able to prove to them that they had a 100,000 plus trade area population, and that they actually were pulling from a lot of the areas that TJ Maxx just assumed they weren't pulling from. And so that cell phone data is huge to really prove out the market. It's also helpful because we used to look at retail leakage and say, okay, what categories are people leaving the community for? But with the cell phone data, now we can see not only where people are coming into and out of the market from, but when they leave, not only just what communities they're leaving to go to, but actually what retailers, shopping centers, restaurants they're going to. And we can actually target those retailers and restaurants if there's an opportunity for duplication or to really fill those gaps.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also kind of hit on a retail leakage analysis, and we started kind of revamping that into a retail demand outlook that really looks at, okay, what's that 2022 demand, what's the demand now versus down the road in 2027. We've really shifted based on the wants and needs of the retailers and restaurants we recruit. So this is what they kind of like to see more now versus the gap in leakage analysis. So really, it breaks it down based on NAICS codes. So food and beverage stores, grocery stores, and really one of the most important components to see is this far right area, the compound annual growth rate. So we like to see anything that's over, 1.5, kind of in that area is really a strong compound annual growth rate. So on our end, this lets us know, okay, there's a strong compound annual growth rate for this specific NAICS code for food and beverage stores, from grocery stores. So that lets us know, okay, based on all our data, we need to go out and recruit a grocery store, a sit-down restaurant, those type things. So this really just backs up the data and lets us know what type of retailers and restaurants that we need to go out and recruit for.
Yeah, and to really simplify it, the way that we approach data is really, you have to do everything you can as a community to really give retailers reasons they should be there. And so the best way that we found to do that is to really know that trade area, really sell your market for what it actually is versus just your city population, and then do most of their legwork for them, and say, hey, we know that we're leaking in this category. We know that we see tons of demand growth. All of our residents are saying, hey, we need more sit-down restaurants or more clothing stores, and really doing as much as you can to prove out that market for them. And that really helps a lot of communities that haven't had opportunities to get in front of those retailers, get in the door, or to have them kind of change the perception of their market. And so that's what we try to do with the data is really, prove out the market, do their homework for them, and then give them those reasons to be there and start that conversation. Part of the way we do that is with marketing and branding. So it's one thing to have that data, and another thing to tell the story of your community with that data. So it's really important how you package those together and how you put together those resources so that when you go to things like ICSC conferences or trade shows or retail live events, that you're giving them what's going to actually move the needle and help them have more interest in your community. I think Kyle's got a couple of examples and best practices of how we typically approach that.
Yeah, definitely. So we have what's called a retail dashboard. We talked about the ease of consumers. When we go out and recruit, we want to make everything as easy on brokers and site selectors. Having a dashboard link where all available sites are listed, where all your trade area reports, all your demographic information, because you're going to have retailers, restaurants kind of snooping, searching your community without you knowing it. And you want to make things as easy on them as possible. So, they'll choose to locate in your community versus down the road where, if you don't have everything listed readily available and, you're computing community 5 minutes down the road, they're going to make a decision based on oftentimes what's easiest for them. So having a list of available sites, reports readily available on your website kind of is key. And, I'll tell you, sites is a huge component of this. Austin can really echo this, but the first thing I hear when we're out recruiting on the community's behalf is, okay, we like what we see. We've gone through the data. We know we can be successful, but where are you going to put us? Here's an example of kind of what some of our site profiles look like. So having site profiles for ground up development, lease space in your shopping centers, as well as redevelopment sites, and redevelopment sites meaning sites in town that might not be serving its highest and best use, to where you think, hey, that might be a good option for so and so that we know is looking at the community, to have somebody come in, scrape that building and build up something that might be at main high traffic count. So sites are a big component of this. And then really building on that is you need to show kind of all of this, really location, what type of site is preferred. Is it a power center, lifestyle center, strip center for these retailers and restaurants? They're going to want to know square footage. They're going to want to know the minimum frontage, layout, maybe some pictures of the inside. Co-tenancy is extremely important. Retailers and restaurants like to cluster around the same type concepts. A lot of people think competition is bad for retailers and restaurants, when exactly it's exactly the opposite. They like to be around each other and kind of feed off of each other, as well as visibility and access. Traffic counts from heavily traveled road, and visibility is definitely key there. And then also, getting a better understanding of trade shows kind of in your region. So ICSC, International Council of Shopping Centers, is definitely kind of the big player out there. But they do a big show every year in Las Vegas, but there's also regional shows that usually last 1 or 2 days. You can sit down and meet with brokers, developers, corporate contacts as well, which is really good to go out there and kind of market your community to those guys, as well as Retail Live, which has really come, on the scene in the past few years, which is a regional show, typically a 1 day, more focused around just retailers and restaurants. We kind of call it speed dating. Usually have 3 or 4 minutes to be able to go up and market your community, make a case for why this specific concept should come in and open a store in your community. And we have a heavy presence at these shows. Basically all the regional shows. Like Austin said, he's leaving to go out to one. I was in one early September 1, actually, in Austin, Texas, which was really a great show. But this is a great place to kind of get your feet wet on the recruitment side. And if you have any questions about this, we can kind of send you a schedule of really where these shows are and when they take place.
And I think the recommendation there from our end is, for most communities, we like the regional events better than going to that Las Vegas event for ICSC, because it's easy to get lost. And regional events, you're going to have more regional contacts focused specifically on opportunities either in your state or your region. That's typically the best place to start. The other thing that we do as a firm is, for our client communities, we'll actually set meetings up for you ahead of time at those events. That's important. If you're going to go to one of these events, you can go and have success just having conversations and kind of organically stopping at booths. But for the most part, having those meetings set up is key, especially when you're going to the larger events like the Las Vegas event. You just can't get FaceTime with people if you don't have a meeting set up, especially the larger retailers and brokers. So those are really the keys to success there, is having that data, having materials, really being able to sell the community, but then, making those scheduled appointments and meetings ahead of time to be able to really push as much as you can and to have as much time with them as possible. And then starting out small with some of those regional events instead of just jumping in and going to the big national events. We see it all the time. Communities will go out to the Las Vegas conference and just kind of get lost in the mix because they haven't had enough time or resources to set up meetings. So regional events are really a great starting point. Or if you haven't been to one in a few years, I'd really encourage looking at some of the regional events out there, especially now that we have enough distance from COVID that we're starting to see those registration numbers be back up to those 2018, 2019 numbers.
Yeah, and at these shows, it's really a good opportunity to kind of build your database of contacts. There's going to be real estate managers, brokers, tenant reps, corporate franchises. So a lot of these concepts, for them to locate in your community, there has to be an active franchisee that owns rights to develop in the area. So being able to talk to those brokers, tenant reps, and saying, hey, okay, is there a franchisee in place? If not, where's the closest franchisee that maybe we could talk to and market our community to them to where they would, possibly be interested in opening up a location in town, as well as preferred developers. So really these shows are a chance to, build your database and gather contacts to where, you can work on those, throughout the year.
And hey, Kyle, I don't want to hurry you too much, but I know we're getting close to an hour, and I know some people have to jump off. So let's transition if we can, and then try to have 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A and answer questions. So if you're still with us and you have any questions, put those either in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll answer some direct questions. But Kyle, what would you say is our takeaway in terms of community leaders looking at retail potential, and then how to get into retail recruitment or kind of level up their recruitment? Give us a couple of takeaways that we can kind of go into the Q&A with, if you will.
Yeah. So the main things I would say is knowing your community. So this local knowledge is the kind of the slide I'm on now, is knowing what's going on now versus what's planned for the future. brokers and site selectors, they're going to look at your community online, and they might not see what residential subdivisions are planned for 6 months down the road. So being able to market your community in the best light to retailers and restaurants is really key, and knowing what they are looking for is really key to getting your foot in the door, and pushing these conversations, kind of moving forward.
And I think from our end, Kyle, tell me if you think differently or if I miss anything, that the most practical ways to do that is get the best data that you can. We really believe in cell phone data. We've had a lot of success with cell phone data and just being able to prove out that market. If you can't get that level of data, get as recent demographics as you can, whether that's just a 2022 ESRI demographic update for city, county, region, or some drive times or some radials. Just have this as up-to-date demographic information as you can. And then to Kyle's point, the sites, you've got to know what sites are available, where you can put retailers, who fits, and then any of that data that you can have to go out and sell. I think that's the best starting point. And then from there, just being aggressive, trying to make as many contacts as you can, and trying to be as knowledgeable as possible on what potential opportunities you have and what contacts are out there to really pair together with those opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of the last thing I want to say is, this is a long-term approach. It's not an overnight process. So, small wins over the course of a year, 2 years, 3 years is something to be proud of. So, traditional economic development is a long-term approach on the retail and restaurant recruitment side. So, we're more than happy to answer some questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, and one point before people start dropping off, we're not really big fans of the hard sale type stuff. So, we're happy to answer questions, or if there's something we can do to be a resource for you, feel free to reach out to either Kyle or myself. If there's something we can do that's that we already have access to, if it's just some quick data or to help answer some very specific questions, we're more than happy to help with that. And can do anything that we can to be a resource for you if you have questions, or if there's some contacts we have that might help. Kyle, I think Riley's going to feed some of these questions into us, so I'll let you take the first few here.
Okay.
So we did have a question come through. Someone asked, any retail trend information to share on the growth of craft beverage and healthy restaurant destinations versus fast food style places?
Yeah, definitely. Austin can echo this, but I've really seen a push in our client communities for more healthy concepts. And I think we're starting to see more national concepts get into the healthy side, more regional focus as well as craft beverages, HTO. The tea to go concepts we're seeing do extremely well right now. We've actually helped quite a few of those open in our client communities in Texas. Really in the past, few months to the past year, I would say 3 or 4 at least. So if you want to reach out to us, we can send you some specific stuff on, what these type concepts are looking for, and really help you get in touch with the right people and point you in the right direction.
Yeah. And on the craft beverage side, we've done a lot in the last 5 years with breweries and tap rooms. I think there's still a lot of growth in the craft brewery space and just in brewery in general. But what we've seen is what has staying power in that world is not just the beer focused breweries or tap rooms. It's more of a mixture of both, where you have the brewery concepts that have the food offerings and the community driven kind of hangout spaces, and really create a culture and environment around it, more so than just the actual brewing. So I think there's still a lot of growth in that brewing space, but more so in that kind of full service, having the food to go along with the beverages and the brewing that's where we've seen the most growth and the most sustainability.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Does anybody else have any other questions before we wrap up? All right. One thing I did want
Riley, we had another question come through about the economy. and just where we see the economy going and what we think is going to happen. I'll just touch on that real quick, and then Kyle, if you have anything else you want to add. But we're hearing some mixed things. We're hearing that we will see a recession, and then we're hearing that we won't. So we don't know right now. It's too hard to say. It seems like there is probably a slowdown coming. I think the biggest takeaway from that is what I referenced earlier. What we're hearing from retailers, restaurants, developers is that there's a sense of urgency right now with really capitalizing off of the opportunity over the next 6-12 months to go ahead and start doing that expansion and get that done before there potentially is a slowdown. So that's what I would say there is, thinking about the future and how to account for a potential economic slowdown. I think being aggressive is the best bet, particularly in terms of retail and new development, because we're starting to see that sense of urgency. And it seems like more and more developers and retailers are telling us that every day. I think it's a little too early to tell how severe the economic slowdown could be. But that's really, I think, the most practical takeaway from our end is that retailers and restaurants and developers are saying, hey, we're doing expansion right now. We're building, we're looking for locations. So I would say take advantage of that while they're being aggressive and kind of match that aggressiveness and go out and try to get retail.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We did have one final question come through that I just wanted to address. Just a reminder that this webinar was recorded, so we will send out the link to the recording as well as the slide deck. That'll probably be either this afternoon or tomorrow, and we will get that out to all of you. Any last words for us, Kyle or Austin, as we close?
Yeah, if we've kind of said this, but I want to echo it again. If we can help y'all with anything, data wise, putting you in touch with the right retailers, restaurants, maybe some local developers around you, feel free to reach out. We want to be able to point y'all in the right direction and help y'all out. So thank y'all for attending. And like Riley said, we'll get the slide deck and the recording of this out this afternoon or first thing tomorrow.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, y'all.
Thank you again. Have a good afternoon.